Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be giving you all a step-by-step guide on how to plan your next trip. So for those of you who are in the planning process for a spring break trip, for a vacation, for a family trip, for a girls trip, for a bachelorette party trip, for a guys trip, anything like that, these tips and tricks will definitely apply to any trip that you are trying to plan. I'm going to be sharing with you all my tips and my steps to planning a successful and a fun trip. So without further ado, let's get right on into the video. Start off, you probably have in mind a place or destination that you want to go to. Whether it's a state, a country, something like that, you probably have a sense of where you want to go, and maybe you haven't narrowed down the exact city and town. So that's where we are going to start this planning process. So at least 6 months out, and for me, I'm a very organized planner. I like to plan way ahead for my trips, and I know not everyone's like this. Sometimes people like more spontaneous trips. That's fine. For me, planning at least 6 months out just gives me some ease, and I can take my time to do research and things like that. But where I want to start is looking at my vision for the trip. I really start thinking about the vibe, what I want to feel like, what I want to bring to this trip, what's the energy that I want to leave this trip with. So maybe this trip is a trip where you really want the vibes to be relaxing, you really want to unwind, you really want there to be a lot of peace and quiet. Or maybe this is a trip where you really want to have more exploration, you really want to immerse yourself in a different culture, in this new environment. You want to be more adventurous in your exploring. Or maybe even this is a trip where you really just want to go out and have fun and just turn up. Or maybe you're in a boat where you want a mixture of all of these different things in one trip. So narrowing down the vibe that you want for this trip is really going to help this planning process overall. Doing this first and foremost will really help also narrow down the people that you want to bring along for this trip, because you want to invite people on this trip that are going to match the vibes, going to match the energy, and are looking for the same thing that you are, right? Not every friend that you have, not every person in your life is gonna be a good travel buddy. You are going to be around each other for a good chunk of time. It's not like you all are going to your separate houses. You are on a trip together for however long your trip is. So you really want to make sure that everyone is also excited for the same things, because you don't want someone who's sulking off in the corner or who really doesn't want to go on this, you know, excursion or something like that, because that's not what they were looking for out of the trip. They wanted a different vibe, they had different intentions for the trip, and that's completely fine. And maybe those just aren't the people that you go on this specific trip with. So you want to make sure the people around you are gonna match this vibe, gonna match this energy, and just overall bring up the energy of the trip. I wholeheartedly believe that who you invite on your trip is going to be a big indicator of what the trip experience is going to be like. Some of the best trips I have been on have been with people who were on the exact same mindset and vibe and energy that I was on, and it just overall made the experience so much more fun and memorable. Once you kind of figure out what vibe you want for the trip, that's also going to help you narrow down the location of exactly where you want to go, right? So you have in mind kind of the destination, the state, maybe the country that you want to be in, but we want to be even more specific in finding what city or town that we actually want to spend a good bulk of our time in. And that city or town is a city or town that you want to match the vibes and the energy that you came up with in the first place. So that's gonna determine whether or not you want to be in a very busy city crowded with a lot of people, or if you want to be at a villa or a resort, or if you want to be really immersed in the hub of the culture of that town or that city, or determine if you want to be more so on the outskirts of things and be away from society for a little bit and find a place that's away from the hustle and bustle of a city. The second thing that I do after handling all of that is figuring out my dates and my budget for the trip. This will help you determine who's actually serious about going on this trip too, because some dates aren't going to work for certain people and maybe you can work around that. And at the same time, the budget may also not work for some people. Some people may be on a stricter and tighter budget than others, and maybe this trip is just not a good fit for them. This will help dwindle out those folks that maybe aren't able to go on this trip. And you're also giving people the opportunity to figure out whether or not this trip is going to be affordable for them. So if that budget is clear cut early on, people have the choice of whether or not they want to commit to the trip. Or they can figure out how much time that they have to save up, right? So planning out earlier in advance can really help if someone really wants to go on the trip and needs a little bit more time to save. My favorite thing to do, and this is probably one of my biggest tips, is to create a Google Doc. A Google Doc is easily shareable. You can share the link with everyone who's going on your trip and they have access to everything that you're planning, and everything is laid out for them right then and there. I have done this a boatload of times where I have listed everything out on paper. I have the accommodations on there, I have the flight times on there, I have the links to restaurant menus, I have the links to different activities that we're gonna go on to, because then you're giving people the opportunity to look at how much things are gonna cost and what is actually taking place. And of course, you know, you want folks to have a say on what you're doing. And at the same time, they also have those links to go on to. So if there's a restaurant on there that's a little bit pricey, you had time in advance to look at that restaurant and see, you know, what you might order or what you might have, or if you can even afford to go to that restaurant. I also do a day-by-day itinerary of all the things that I plan to do on that trip and on those days. So I break it down day by day and I just list everything. And I put all the reservations on there if I've made reservations for an activity or for a restaurant, and we have all the times on there. That's not to say that the trip isn't spontaneous, because there have been a lot of things that have been on my itinerary and my agenda, and we just went with the flow and we didn't go to that thing. So you may have the reservation on there, and I'll always say it's better to book that thing and not go to it than not have it booked at all. So that happens a lot of times where maybe you did have that reservation and something else came up and you just went with the flow, and that's completely okay. And I'm not tied down to an itinerary, but it's helpful to have some structure of some things that you want to go to, and also grouping things based on location. So if you're going to be spending a full day in one specific city, you can kind of plan around and use Google Maps to figure out what other things are happening in that area and group those activities for that day together. So that way you're saving money on Ubers, you're saving money on Lyft, and you can also figure out what places are walkable distance from each other and save money that way too. Another thing that I always make sure to add on my Google Doc sheets that I share with people is a list of maybes. This is a list of everything that maybe didn't make it to the itinerary, but if we're flexible and we need a second option for something, there are a ton of things to choose from that I already did research on. So I end up using that list sometimes if I go to a place and it's not what I expected or what I wanted. I just go to that Google Doc, scroll down to the maybes list, and choose something from there that's nearby. And that has helped me a whole lot. The third thing, and this is the first thing that I usually task people with, is buying that flight. That's honestly the first thing to book, because at this point, you're going on this trip, you show that you're committed to this trip, and you have a time of when you plan on landing there. I'm not too picky with airlines. Honestly, I mean, I don't fly Spirit, but I have flown American Airlines, Delta, JetBlue. I'm really not too picky on airlines. Whichever one's the cheapest is honestly probably what I'm gonna lean towards. I will say when you're figuring out dates and flights, try to avoid holidays, try to avoid school breaks, try to avoid just those types of high tide times where there's going to be an influx in people traveling, and it's probably going to be an influx in pricing too. So I try to travel as out of season as I can to try and avoid that influx in prices. Hopper is also a great app that I absolutely love to use. I don't book on Hopper because I get a little nervous, I won't lie, but I do use their tracking. So they track which dates are going to be the cheapest for you to book a flight, and it kind of anticipates, okay, these prices will drop by this much by this time, or these prices for this flight will increase by this date, and it gives you a time frame of when might be the best time to buy that ticket. And I love it because it monitors everything and it sends me notifications, and I've used this multiple times and it's been super helpful. Next up is booking accommodations. This is the second thing that I do, and I also do this really early on. I usually go for an Airbnb or a hotel when I'm traveling. I know some people really like hostels and find those really comfortable, but from my personal experience, I have booked hotels or Airbnbs for the most part. One thing I will say is Google reviews, okay? I go through so many reviews when booking a place because I really can't just stay anywhere. Like, I really have to look for certain things and the cleanliness, especially during this pandemic, before I travel anywhere. I know some people are very laissez-faire with this, and maybe this isn't a big deal for you. And for me, where I lay my head at night is very important. I cannot just sleep anywhere, and I know I won't be in the hotel or the Airbnb all day, but I just need to be comfortable there. This is where the more people that are invited on the trip, the more helpful it might be in the pricing of your accommodations too. For those of you who do decide to stay at a hotel, a big travel tip I have is if your flight is landing earlier than your check-in time and you arrive in the city or town earlier, then you can go ahead and call the hotel and ask for an earlier check-in time if they have a room available, or you can go ahead and ask them to hold your bags. Sometimes there is a charge. I've never been charged to have my bags held before my check-in time. I just call, ask if they're able to do that, and then I go ahead, drop my bags off, get my ticket, and then come back and check in at a later time. I haven't had any issues with this, and my bags will be held there from like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. check-in time, and they're fine. Now, the fifth and next step is the most fun part, and that is looking at what you want to do. Looking at activities, excursions, places to eat, all of that is super exciting and also can be super overwhelming. So I say do your research on everything. I spend so much time looking at reviews, and social media has been especially helpful lately. So I will look at Instagrams, TikToks, I will look at YouTube vlogs and videos of people who have traveled there, what they're doing. And if something looks really interesting and fun, like something I want to try, then I will add it to my list and do my own research. Same thing with restaurants. One of the best things about traveling is the food. So looking at different restaurants that are available in your area and even beyond. And you also want to make sure that you're looking at certain things. So does this place have a dress code? Are there certain requirements? Do I need to have a vaccination card? Do I have to have a negative COVID test? What are the things that I may need to bring to this place or to this activity that I want to do? Once you figure out those things, that's when you can really have fun crafting up your itinerary and grouping things together that are close in location. Number 6 is optional, but it's also a really fun part because once you figure out what you're actually gonna be doing and you have that itinerary, you can begin to plan the outfits. That's one of the best parts of a trip, right? Planning your outfits, what look you wanna go for, all of that is super fun. With that being said, and with excursions and activities and all of that, I do say bring cash if you can. Bring a small chunk of cash so that you aren't overspending, because it's really easy to swipe a card, and when you have cash, you can kind of monitor how much you're spending a little bit better because you know how much you have remaining. Step number 7 is when the trip is coming up, maybe a month or 2 out is when you can really start to book some of those reservations. Especially with this pandemic, booking reservations is really important. You don't want to be waiting in a line and wasting your time doing that. And also with the pandemic in general, most places are asking for reservations at restaurants and things like that. Again, if you don't end up going, you don't end up going, but at least you have that reservation if you do decide to go to that thing. And then once you have those reservations, plug them into that Google Doc that you have. Step number 8 is right before the trip happens. Usually a couple weeks out is when you do the trip and vacation prep. This is a really fun and exciting part. This is when you get your nails done, you get your hair done, you start to pack that suitcase, and you just start to get more excited for the trip because it's feeling more real. And because you have everything in that Google Doc and you did most of the work really early on, everything is there for you to look at the day of the trip, when you're about to go to the airport, when you're going to your different accommodations. Everything is outlined in that Google Doc and you can easily access it from laptop, phone, anywhere, and everyone has access to it on the trip, so everyone is on the same page. And those are all of my tips and steps to how I have planned successful girls trips and trips in general in the past. I hope you all find this video helpful and you all have fun planning your own personal trips. As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this of me on my channel. And make sure to follow me on all my social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, all at as told by Brandy. And I will see you all in my next video. Bye, y'all.